Hello, hello. This is going to be my third entry in my review for the Soulblight Gravelords new Battletome. We're just finishing it off with the Warscrolls for, I guess, the supplementary Warscrolls, the ones from Cursed City, from Underworlds, and Warcry. And then we're going to have a look at the match play rules, the battle tactics, and sort of grand strategies. Bit of a pre-warning on this section. I really don't like including supplementary sort of Warscrolls in my army. I like that Games Workshop makes them. It's nice that if you own things from sort of the Age of Sigmar universe, you can include those models in the appropriate army. You can sort of use them for the aesthetic or the narrative, or just because you've done a really good paint job or something, or you need to make 2,000 points. I like that they have rules that do function and that they're not totally useless. But I get a little frustrated when they make some of the better units in the book those sort of supplemental units, and you can't buy them by themselves. So one example that we'll see is the Askurgan Trueblades. I'll talk a bit more about it when we get there. They have a pretty good war scroll, but currently you can only get them in a paired box with a bunch of terrain and a bunch of corn miniatures. So if you want to access that actually pretty decent war scroll because you want to play with a competitive army, then you're going to have to fork out a whole bunch of cash for stuff that you don't necessarily want. And I find that really frustrating. So yeah, I tend to prefer when Games Workshop makes these war scrolls either suboptimal or only really makes them for things you can buy separately. So in Slaves to Darkness, for example, you can buy all the Warcry warbands separately. So it's okay that they're pretty good. They feel like actually a part of the army that's really considered. Whereas for Soulblight, in this case, we've got some warbands and underworld things and stuff, and Cursed City, and it all feels like it's very tacked on to the army. So apologies if I don't have as much analysis or as sort of deeper commitment to these things as to the other War Scrolls. I do think most of them aren't very good, but there are a couple standouts that are actually very valuable and that will probably be staples in certain lists. The other thing I just want to quickly address before we get into it, previous two videos have sort of a quality issue. I did figure out where it was. I thought initially it was somewhere between me exporting it from an editing software and uploading it to YouTube. It was doing some sort of compression. That's not the case. It was in the recording. I found the setting and fixed it, so hopefully what's on the screen will be much more readable this time. But unfortunately, the two sort of 4-hour videos I've made have been recorded in a lower quality, and I can't go back and like fix them and re-upload them or anything. So unfortunately, we're stuck with that. Hopefully it doesn't ruin the viewing experience too much. They are kind of readable, but it's very blurry text, so I apologize for that. Anyway, without further ado, I think we'll get straight into it. Let's chuck on the Warscrolls and get talking. All right, so I did want to make a little bit of a gripe. Just Radukar's Court is the only way to buy a lot of these Warscrolls. I think you can buy Radukar by himself, but if you want to get Gorslav, Torgillius, Halgrim, the Kosargi, the Vargskyr, or the Bloodborne, the only ways to get them are either buying the whole Cursed City box set or by buying this Radukar's Court set. I kind of understand why this happens. I think a lot of the time you'll get a big sprue and maybe an axe from this guy will be on the same sprue as the Vargskyr, so they have to sell them together. And a bit from one is often found on the sprue of another one. I don't know if that's the case with these guys specifically. I don't own these models. But I get why Games Workshop has to sell them together. It's just that some of these models are very good, some of them are very bad. So it feels bad forking out a whole bunch of money. This is probably a bit inflated if you're from the US, because I'm in Australia, we've got a weaker currency here. But yeah, really frustrating. This is very expensive. If you want just one of these guys, that's way, way, way too much. Thankfully, you can usually find them on eBay and things like that. People will buy this kit and then break it up into individual bits and then just sell them with a little bit of a markup. That's generally the better way to get them if you want just one part of them. All right. So I bring that up because we're going to talk about Gorslav and Torgillius. And these guys are two of the examples of really good War Scrolls. They're both from Cursed City. And Gorslav here, I think he's very similar to how he used to be 5-inch move, 7 wounds, 6 up save, and he's got actually quite a good melee profile considering he's the closest thing to him is probably a necromancer. So that's actually a really good melee profile. He's got a bodyguard effect. It happens on a 2-up. So he's got one of the better bodyguard effects in the game. He's not a wizard, so he doesn't actually have like a necromancer spell or anything. But in return, you do get Arise. Once per turn at the end of your movement phase, you can pick one friendly Vyrkos Deadwalker Zombies unit that has been destroyed. A new replacement unit with half the models is set up wholly within 9 of this guy and 9 away from enemy units. So I think the only real thing to notice there is, I think previously it was just Deadwalkers. I think you could bring back Direwolves as well. Typically people are using this guy in the big, having 2 big units of 60 zombies list anyway. But I do think before he could bring back Direwolves, so that's gone. And even though he's replacing units in the movement phase now, I think it used to be, I'm actually not sure where it used to be, but they've put it in the movement phase so it lines up with Endless Legions. Even though it's lined up there, you still only put guys 9 away from the enemy, even though with Endless Legions, you can put them 3 away. It does say at the end of your movement phase, so I believe because it's your turn, you can sequence this so that you check to see if you get the unit back with Endless Legions first, and then you use Gorslav's ability, and that can that might make the difference for you about whether you want to put your unit 3 inches away or whether you want to be 9 away and be able to charge and pile in that turn. So bit of useful tech there. I think basically you take this guy if you're running that big, a couple really big units of zombies, and then you don't if you're not running them. I think that list might still exist, even though zombies do damage in a really different way now. It's a bit, I'm gonna say it's a bit less threatening, knowing that if you just like ignore zombies, they don't do a whole lot. Like if you screen a unit of zombies, the zombies aren't going to be able to kill the screen very well, and the screen isn't going to do much damage to the zombies, so the splash models won't do much to them. Whereas before, if you ignored the big 60 unit of zombies, it would just sort of roll over you and start doing a fair bit of damage. I don't know if that list is still going to be a thing in the new book, so I don't know if Gorslav is still going to be a thing. But I think there's definitely a role for zombies, and you know, it's a bit of math on you could buy a unit of 20 zombies for the same price as Gorslav. So you probably aren't taking him unless you have, I don't know, at least 60 zombies, but probably more. And, you know, most of the time you can bring units of zombies back just using Endless Legions. So you really have to have a lot of zombies and a lot of zombies dying to notice the effect of something like Arise. So yeah, it's going to be a really niche application, but really powerful in that application. Right, Torgillius the Chamberlain. So this guy's a necromancer. He's got death mages, so he can get a lore spell, 6 wounds with a 6-up save. I think it's nice that he gets an extra wound because he doesn't have the bodyguard ability, so he's a bit more likely to die. He does have a shooting attack that's not horrible, so make sure you remember that. I think Necrotizing Bolt might have been a Warscroll spell in the past, and now it's just a shooting attack. That's fine. It's not gonna do too much damage with the 2d6 attacks there, but you know, it's got. Oh, actually, I didn't notice this. It's damage 2. I thought it was damage 1. This is actually an alright shooting attack. Like looking at that profile, it's actually going to do a wound or 2, which is neat in Soulblight. You don't have much access to that. And at range 18, you can be trying to pick off heroes and apply an extra wound or 2. It's actually a very useful sort of thing to have. Yep, he's a wizard, and he's got a good access to the good lore. One thing, the one thing you're taking this guy for is probably this Trusted Lieutenant ability. Friendly Vyrkos summonable units have a ward of 5+ while they are wholly within 12 of this unit. Vyrkos also has access to, I think it's called Ulfankani Phylactery, which is in the lore is an artifact made by this guy that does basically the same thing. It gives you +1 to ward rolls for your 6-up ward specifically. So you can have, in a Vyrkos army, you can have quite a lot of summonable units that are accessing that 5-up ward. I should note, Gorslav is also Vyrkos, only works on Vyrkos units. So I think part of, when you're thinking about Vyrkos, they're a bit like Hallowed Knights from Stormcast Eternals, where you have to consider guard as part of their subfaction abilities. I think with Vyrkos, you have to consider all the different little characters as sort of part of their subfaction abilities. So Torgillius, Gorslav, and Ivya, Annika, and Kritza. I did forget in my last video, I didn't notice that Kritza is summonable. That makes a lot of sense given his previous ability to come back to the battlefield. So keep that in mind. He can be put in the grave and healed with Deathly Invocation and things like that. And he can come back on the 4-up. But yeah, I think these guys you should just consider as part of the Vyrkos subfaction abilities. A 5-up ward is very good. He's got a decent shooting attack, cast a spell, and that's pretty good. He's vulnerable to being sniped, but I don't think he's that many points. Let me just double check. Torgillius Chamberlain, 125. So he's about the same price as like a Vampire Lord. And yeah, Vampire Lord gives a unit +1 attack. This guy gives everything within 12 a 5-up ward. So I do think you'll see this guy pretty frequently in a Vyrkos army. Gorslav you'll see in that specific Deadwalkers army. Also keep in mind you can put artifacts and command traits, the Vyrkos specific artifacts and command traits on unique characters. So you could take like Gorslav as your general and give him the thing that lets your zombies move another 3 inches if they start the turn near him. They're probably going to start the turn near him because you want this bodyguard effect. There's a neat little bit of synergy there for him as well. These two are quite good. Again, I'm very frustrated that they're in a large set of guys where you've got some extra dudes that you're not as interested in. But I guess we should cover those before we get too far into that. All right, Radukar the Wolf. Radukar you can actually buy separately. He's, I think, about the same price as a Vampire Lord, and he does something pretty similar. And points-wise, he's also very, very close to a Vampire Lord. I think he's actually exactly the same, 130. He's got the same attack profile, 1 extra wound, but a worse save. He doesn't fly like the other Vyrkos vampires. They don't fly. Still a wizard though, which is different to Radukar the Beast, who is not a wizard. Gets the hunger, and he's got the same call to the hunt. This is actually really sad that it only targets summonable units. We'll see in a second the Kosargi Nightguard that he is meant to stand right next to, and that has a pretty decent melee profile but a low number of attacks. Those guys are not summonable, so they don't benefit from his call to the hunt, which is really sad. And I think Call to the Hunt used to be everything within 18, and now it's just summonable units within 12. It's much smaller. I could probably check. I just want to quickly have a look at the Radukar the Beast, because I do remember that still being 18. So if we just have a look there. Is Call to the Hunt. No, it is 12 as well. So same command ability, harder to access because he moves slower. He doesn't run in charge, and he's got 2 inches fewer movement. But for the cheaper points cost, that's still quite a powerful command ability. You compare that to the normal Vampire Lord. The normal Vampire Lord is getting +1 attack to a summonable unit, just 1 summonable unit within 12, but you don't have to charge with the Vampire Lord. With this guy, you do have to charge, but it's all units within 12. I'd probably prefer the normal Vampire Lord, but you do get access to a bodyguard ability with Kosargi Nightguard, and if you're making Radukar your general, giving him the command trait, you might want to have the bodyguard. But if I remember right, the command traits are one that makes zombies move a little bit faster, one that makes him count as 6, so that's not very useful because he already counts as 2, and what's the last Vyrkos command trait? Just have a look at that. Driven by Death Stench, or you can reroll charges. So you don't get anything in particular that I would want to take him as my general for. I think you won't see this guy that much just because the normal Vampire Lord is probably a bit better. The buff is a bit easier to use by just applying it every turn instead of needing to charge. So you can buy him separate, but you probably won't. But if you have him, I mean, he's a cool model. I'd probably just run him as a normal Vampire Lord though. All right, the Vargskyr. This guy got much worse because he lost his 5-up ward. He's not summonable or anything, so he can't get it back. In general, he does a little bit more damage than a hero. Like this is 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1/2 damage. That's like a generic Stormcast hero attack profile. He's got a little bit of extra damage because he's got these D3 extra attacks that are in 2. That's quite good. But how many points are we paying for a Vargskyr? 110. This guy fits into that awkward role of being like the foot melee assassin. He just doesn't do that much damage. He moves okay, but I think I would rather, for 110 points, you could just take a unit of like Black Knights. Black Knights are summonable, so you can bring them back. They move 12. They've got, instead of having a 3d6 charge, just imagine you move 4 extra inches. It's kind of useful. It's like having a 4-inch extra charge, which I would probably take over a 3d6 charge. I mean, this can catch people off guard if they've got redeploy and stuff, but he's not doing enough damage that's a big threat. And with a 5-up save and only 8 wounds, he dies pretty quick. I don't rate this guy very highly. Used to be alright with the 5-up ward. He's surprisingly durable, and if he kept that and the new hunger, then I think he might be an okay take. But the way he is now, I just wouldn't bother. The Kosargi Nightguard. So there's a bit of hubbub about these guys. The Vyrkos subfaction heroic action we got there. Their subfaction heroic action is an ability to add D3 models to a Deadwalkers unit. And some people have noticed that Kosargi Nightguard and Corpse Carts are both Deadwalkers units. These guys have 4 wounds. Corpse Carts have 6 wounds. So if you could add D3, 4 or 6 wound models to your army, that'd be a very, very powerful ability compared to just adding zombies or adding direwolves. But if you look at the pitch battle profiles, I think in both cases, Corpse Carts are single, and Kosargi Nightguard, I didn't expect them to be single because they come in a pair of 2, but I think all single means is that they can't be reinforced, and I suspect it also means that their maximum unit size can't be increased. I know book rules trump, like army rules tend to trump core rules. That's exception-based design, I'm pretty sure. But if this isn't the way it works now, I guarantee this will be FAQ'd. For now, it's pretty cool. If it works, you can have D3 extra Kosargi or D3 extra Corpse Carts added to your unit. And I think these guys with a ward of 5 up, with this attack profile, if you put them near Radukar the Wolf, or I guess it works near the Beast, they got 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1/2 damage. That's actually pretty good. I think it's quite powerful if you can do that. But given that it says single, I'm pretty sure that will be the thing, if not now, after the FAQ, that stops you using that Vyrkos heroic action to add D3 models to this unit. Otherwise, I think it's the 90 points for 2. I don't think you take these guys. As a direct comparison to the Vargskyr, they do a lot less damage, but they do have the 5-up ward. They don't have the hunger because they're not a vampire. And, they do get +1 attack while they're near Radukar, but they don't get access to this call to the hunt. So it just feels sort of bad playing them. I don't think they're very good. And Radukar the Beast doesn't have access to the bodyguard rule, so not really a lot of point in taking them. Right, Vyrkos Bloodborne. These guys, I think, actually do have a place, mostly because these guys are 90 points for 3. And the most direct comparison for these guys is going to be Vargeists. Vargeists have a movement of 12. These guys only move 10. Vargeists have 4 wounds. These guys only have 3. Vargeists have a 5-up save. These guys only have 6. So they're a little bit slower, a little bit more squishy, and their damage is a little bit less because they're missing the leader and they're missing the exploding sixes. But in Vyrkos, you might have Battletome, so you might get those exploding sixes anyway. 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1, 2 damage is an okay damage profile. Hurts a fair bit being hit by that sort of thing. But the big ability these guys get that Vargskyr don't is this Shadow Fast. So, after deployment, but before the first battle round begins, you can move this unit up to 10 inches. If both players can move units before the first battle round, they must roll off and the winner chooses who moves their units first. My understanding is that you don't choose the turn order until the start of the first battle round. I could be wrong about that, but that changes how good these guys are. If you don't get to see the turn order, then these guys are much more useful when you outdrop your opponent and you get to know the turn order because you're going to pick it, versus you're trying to move them, but moving them will be contingent on whether your opponent chooses to go first or second. They're obviously a very squishy unit, so if you advance with them too much, then your opponent can probably just kill them in the first turn. But at the same time, like, it's a fair bit of threat you can push on your opponent turn 1 and try and make your opponent take first turn. So there's a bit of a use in it in that sense as well. Obviously, if these guys get to make the move after your opponent, after the first turn order is decided, they get a lot better, but I don't think that's how it works. So I think mostly you want to take these guys in a low drop Vyrkos list. They're actually, despite being Vyrkos and like Vyrkos Bloodborne in the name, there's nothing in here that hinges on them being in Vyrkos. So you could plausibly take them in any subfaction. I think they just don't get things like they won't have access to the Castelli bonus or something like that. So they lose out on some of those faction bonuses. You can't redeploy them with Neferata and then do Shadow Fast or something like that. There's a few sort of things that don't quite combo, but they're a generically useful unit. Like, this ability is unique in the book. And compared to Vargskyr are much more expensive, and they can't sort of charge out of their deep strike. So I think you'll find a place for these models in specific. I wouldn't mind having some and just trying them out, because being able to shove that combat profile 10 inches up the board and then be able to move another 10 and sort of charged first turn, I think does have a place. It is quite useful. It can help with getting that turn 1 battle tactic a lot of the time. An easy access to Desecrate, although we do have pretty easy access to Desecrate just through the Unquiet Dead, through summoning our summonable units. Also put some pressure on weaker units like Screens. Often your opponent will have a roughly 90-point unit, and you can trade that, if that's beneficial to you, right at the start of the game with these guys, and then your opponent has to devote some sort of thing to killing the Vyrkos Bloodborne right in their deployment zone, rather than doing the opposite to you, charging right over and trading in your deployment zone. So yeah, I actually rate these guys. I think they're pretty good, and you can take them in any sub-faction as far as I can tell, and they'll still be useful. Obviously in Vyrkos, they have access to some things like Belladamma's Under a Killing Moon benefits these guys. But yeah, they're worth taking if you've got them. Watch Captain Halgrim. I think he's a bit expensive for what he does. Let's have a look. He's 110. So this guy has like a White King sort of profile. He does have a worse armor save than a White King. He's got the same attacks, and he's got the same 6s to hit, do 2 mortals in addition effect. But instead of giving you 6s to hit or exploding, you get this Disciplined Advance thing, and it lets you run the full 6 with 3 Death Rattle units. Worth noting, this guy is a Death Rattle unit, so obviously he can be one of those 3 units. It makes sense in Vyrkos because the White King in Vyrkos is a bit redundant. You'll have Belladamma giving you 6s to hit, do 2 hits. So you can take, I guess if you have the White King model, you can probably let, your opponent will probably let you use them as a Halgrim if you want. This is, I think, not that useful in this army. The main thing I'm thinking here is if you want your units to move quite quickly and not be able to charge, generally you just put them in the grave and then summon them out of the grave from reserve. There's a bit of an advantage being able to move quickly. I haven't played that much with him. This is much quicker than before. This one advance used to give them, I think, 4 inches to their movement, or maybe 3 inches. So being able to move 3 units 6 inches, I think is actually pretty powerful and might make him useful. He's summonable as well, just like the other White Kings. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a play in that. I know OBR does something like this. They use their extra 3-inch move to sort of alpha bunker, but we can do that anyway with just coming out of a grave site. So I don't know how often this will come up. There's probably a list out there where this unique, interesting bit of tech gets used, but otherwise I don't think you'll see him in most lists. All right. Askurgan Trueblades. By the way, I think that's all the Cursed City stuff. Again, worth noting that these Kosargi Nightguard are bad and the Vargskyr is bad. Halgrim is like, I don't think you'll use him that much. And then Gorslav, Torgillius, and the Bloodborne are pretty good. So it's really, really frustrating that they're all bundled together and that you have to pay quite a bit to get access to all of them, because I really only want access to half of them. And for me, I don't really play Vyrkos. I kind of want some of these, but I'm not even certain they'll be that good once I try them in game. So again, really frustrating that they are this expensive. Anyway, we're up to the Askurgan Trueblades. They are pretty good. I think I mentioned earlier that I'm a bit frustrated. Oh, we've got another thing for them. So these guys come in the Blood Hunt box, which is pretty expensive. It comes with some corn guys and some terrain. So if you don't need those things, it's enormously expensive. It can be nice to, if you're just starting out and you want sort of some terrain to make a table to play with your friends, it gets a bit better because this terrain is pretty good. Gets even better if you know somebody who plays Khorne who wants this warband, but it's a lot of effort to access just these 8 models. When you look at other warbands, they're a third or less of the price, and I think that would be much more reasonable. These guys are 180 points, I believe, for the 8 models there. Where are we looking? Askurgan Trueblades. Always frustrates me that this isn't just alphabetical. There we go. 8 models for 180 points. They're 2 wounds each with a 4-up save and 6-inch move. Worth noting that 2 of the models in the unit have 4 wounds instead of 2. So they have about the same number of wounds as if there were 10 models with 2 wounds each. And then 2 of the attacks profiles are a bit better. So it ends up sort of compensating. Like this guy has, the champion has double the attacks, and then the Cursed Blood has double the attacks with sort of a bonus rend and a -1 to hit and an extra attack. Altogether, this is about the same as if they just had 10 models in the unit, and then like a little bonus for the unit champion. The upshot of having characters that have 4 wounds is that the hunger is slightly more usable. You can sort of, let's say you take 5 wounds in a combat phase. You can put 2 wounds on one of the 2 wound models, he'll die. And then you put the remaining 3 wounds on probably the champion or maybe the Cursed Blood. And then the next time you activate, you can heal 3 wounds as opposed to just healing 1 wound. If you put them all on 2 wound models, it would sort of kill 2 and then 1 wound would be left over. So the hunger is a bit more usable on units that have these like weird wound characteristics. There's a bit of a push your luck element to it, where obviously if you put wounds on your champion or your Cursed Blood and you take additional wounds somehow, then you're going to have to lose one of the advantages, whether you're losing attacks or I think mostly you're losing the ability for the unit to issue commands to itself, because you'll lose attacks if you put wounds on the other guys anyway, or you lose this gut-wrenching howl. So you probably want to be putting them on the champion, I think, before the Curse Blood, because as we're about to see, gut-wrenching howl is very good. All right. So gut-wrenching howl. At the end of the charge phase, if this unit includes any Curse Bloods, you can pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of this unit and say that the Curse Blood will unleash a gut-wrenching howl. If you do so, roll a dice, add 1 to the roll for each Curse Blood in the unit. On a 4-up, the Strike Last effect applies to that enemy unit in the following combat phase. Okay. One thing to notice is that even though you can only use this if you have a Curse Blood, the first Curse Blood does add 1 to the roll. So basically the unit starts on a 3-up for this ability, and then if you reinforce them, because you'll notice they're not single. I've lost where they are. Askurgan Trueblades, they're not single in the pitch battle profile, so you can reinforce this unit. And if you do, this ability will happen on a 2+. So very, very reliable opponent fights last effect. This, I think, is why you'll see these units being taken. They have like a decent damage profile, and this strike last effect is very, very powerful. They can go into any subfaction, and they do benefit from the subfaction abilities. They're not locked to anything. So you can buff them in Castelli. They can use things like the Legion of Night charge in the combat phase. They can be redeployed with Neferata. There's lots of little things you can benefit from. In Vyrkos, you get the 6s to hit or exploding from Belladama, things like that. And I think some of the synergies, I'm excited to use these guys in Legion of Night, because I think having them maybe near a unit of Graveguard means if your opponent charges your Graveguard, then these Askurgan Trueblades can countercharge and make your opponent fight last, give the Graveguard a chance to wipe out the thing that's attacking them. That to me seems like a very powerful combination. Obviously, people don't really want to charge the Trueblades because they'll have to fight last, but they can probably survive a hit from a unit of Trueblades, but can't survive a hit from a unit of Graveguard. So sort of putting them near each other means if you charge one and leave the other one out, they can cover each other by charging in. And it happens in the same turn. So if you had 2 units of Graveguard next to each other that were covering each other in the same way, someone could either double charge both of them and sort of kill all of them if they had a powerful enough unit, or even if they charge one and then you do charge in, they still get to fight first and destroy a lot of Graveguard and really minimize your combat effectiveness. Having just a unit of these guys really gets in your opponent's head. It's a bit like that Orb of Enchantment, I think, in the Legion of Blood. Really gets in their head and makes them second guess whether they want to come into your more damaging units. I think especially Graveguard is going to be the combination here. But they work well with a lot of other things. I find Strike Last sort of gets better the more of it you have, or Strike First. So in Vyrkos, you've already got access to a kind of activation wars thing where when you activate a hero, you can activate another unit as well. You can add these guys on top of it. So you could potentially have quite a lot of units fighting before your enemy. Like if you do a double charge, so your Trueblades and something else charge a unit, and then maybe your hero and some Blood Knights charge a different unit. The hero and Blood Knights can go first. The Trueblades can make the enemy unit strike last, so the Trueblades and the unit that they charge with can fight first. And overall, you've got quite a lot of your army attacking before the enemy. It allows you to be really offensive and really aggressive in certain turns. And that's something that Soulblight didn't have beforehand. So these guys are, I think, quite powerful. Their stats are good enough to justify the 180 points. If you compare them to other units that look similar, I think Gut Rippers on release were horrible for 180. Bloodletters, I think, are 180 now, and they got like 2 wounds. Bloodletters are much worse than these guys. Volkite come to mind at 160 points. I think Volkite are getting to the point where they're a bit more comparable because they're going to fight on death. but I would still much prefer these guys than a unit of Volkite. These guys are honestly, I think they're quite good. Most or many Soulblight armies will benefit from having a reinforced unit of them, and that's why I'm a bit peeved that they come in this $310 box. I don't want to spend $600 on one unit, one reinforced unit. I think that's a bit rich, even by Warhammer standards. I think eventually they'll release them in their own box, but for now, it's very pay to win. These guys are very good and locked behind that paywall. Now, I haven't even talked about Creed of the Beast, because even without Creed of the Beast, these guys are very good. This effect only works on monsters, so the way I think you should think about it is that it's just gravy. It's like bonus extra stuff that you get, where the rest of the War Scroll is enough to justify taking them. This is every now and then you'll just get a really, really neat bonus. So subtract 1 from hit and wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by enemy monsters that target this unit. In addition, each time an enemy monster is destroyed by attacks made by this unit, add 3 inches to this unit's move characteristic and 1 to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons for the rest of the battle. Okay, so -1 to be hit and wound by monsters is significant. It'll come up every now and then. Your opponent's monsters will not want to fight these guys because they take a lot less damage. Just stacking those 2 debuffs together makes it very hard to sort of one-hit these guys, on top of the fact that their monster's probably going to have to fight last and might get bracketed by all their attacks first. And then if you do kill a monster, which, you know, these guys do a fair bit of damage, but it's unlikely they're killing monsters very often. If you do manage to kill a monster, you get a fairly substantial bonus. Adding 3 to the movement and 1 to the attacks is actually really good. Going from 6 to 9 inches is really useful. And going from 2 to 3 attacks on most of the models, I think makes them a fair bit scarier, especially if you're in Castelli. If you kill a monster in Castelli, you get +1 to your damage as well. And with an extra damage, these guys are really, really scary. So moving 9 with like damage 2, 3 attacks, 3s and 3s -1, that's looking a lot like a Chosen or a Retributor profile. It's very, very close. But then they also have this fight last effect. I think if you're in that situation, then you're in sort of, it's magical Christmas land. You've won the lottery. Your Trueblades are really going to tear your opponent apart. It's unlikely to happen because they probably don't have monsters that these guys are killing. And if they do, they're probably wise to keep their monsters away from these guys. But the fact that compared to like Ivya, for example, Ivya is not very good aside from her ability to deal with monsters. And I think that'll make you feel really bad, including her, because in a lot of lists, you just won't get any benefit out of her, and you would have been much better off just having a Vampire Lord. The Askurgan Trueblades are different. They're good basically all the time. And then if your opponent has monsters or is monster heavy, they just get way, way better. So I really like these guys. I like the models. Some of them I think are a bit weird, but I really, really like. There's a few in particular, like the Cursed Blood and the guy with the hood and stuff, that I think look absolutely excellent. And I'm excited to get some when they eventually release them in their own box. Or maybe I'll have to go in with a friend who's playing Khorne, because they're a really, really fun unit, really powerful unit. And I like that we have foot vampires. I know a lot of people were hanging out for like armored vampires, but I think we're really being treated with these models and this unit. So watch out for them. Once they come out in their own box and you don't have to buy the whole Warcry box set, I think you'll see a lot of these guys floating around. They're like a sleeper hit. All right. Next up, I've already covered the Death Rattle Skeletons. So I'm just going to have a look at the Sepulchral Guard now. These guys have a horrible, horrible set of weapons, just because they all kind of do the same thing, but you have to roll them all separately. So straight off the bat, there's just a horrible experience in playing them, where you have to go, oh, this guy has the spear and this guy has the mace, and oh, you've killed 2. I think I took the guy with the great blade, or Oh no, it's the guy with the scythe. Sorry, what does the scythe do? Yep, and it's not a fun experience using units like this. I really wish, like I know there's a bit of narrative, they have different weapons, yes, but if they just said like ancient weapon, just like up here, I would be totally fine with it. And you know, I don't think this adds anything to the experience of using the Sepulchral Guard. These guys are, I think, 100 points, and they are single, if I remember right. So, Sepulchral Guard. There we are. 7 models, 100 points, single, unique. So you can only have one of them, and you can't reinforce them. They do have 2 wounds each, so despite being more expensive than skeleton warriors, like 7 of them being more expensive than 10 skeleton warriors, they do have more wounds. But I think the lower save, the lack of this ability, means they're much less durable. To be fair, though, if you're only taking 10 skeleton warriors aren't all that durable either. On the upside, you do get 2 abilities. One is they do slightly more damage, so 6s to hit do 2 hits instead of 1. It's this unit is not doing a ton of damage to begin with. They mostly have 1 attack, and they hit on 4s, so 6s to hit is not changing the game all that much. Frightening speed, you can reroll charge rolls for the unit. In addition, they can pile in 6. That 6-inch pile in, I guess that's kind of neat. I don't think there are many combinations with it, but if you're at the end of your list building and you, for some reason, you've included an 85-point unit, just a 10-man unit of Death Rattle skeletons, and you got 15 points spare, and you own some Sepulchral Guard, I think you don't feel too bad about taking the guard over the skeletons. I think they benefit from all the same buffs based on their keywords. As a 10-man unit, they're about the same. They'll do roughly the same thing. They'll screen, and you'll have access to this 6-inch pile-in and a free charge reroll if that comes up. But I wouldn't go out and buy them. I don't think that you really need them in your army. And honestly, 15 points for a Triumph bid might be a better use in a lot of situations. Yeah, there's nothing special going on here. All right, Deintalos, the Exile, and the Exiled Dead. I do not like this guy. I don't love his model or the Exiled Dead. They're, I think, 220 points for you get both at once. And the Exiled Dead, the most important thing to notice about them is that they are not summonable. This is like the Frankenstein's monster version of zombies. The only way to create them is for Deintalos to make them in his laboratory, so he can't pull them out of the grave using death magic. That's not how he works. He does have a shooting attack, but it's not like Torgillius's. It's a very bland, useless shooting attack. It's very unlikely to do anything. You got 2 attacks. You'll miss one of them. Maybe you probably wound with one, and your opponent has a decent chance of not saving it. So maybe this does 1 damage. Like, well, it's not worth thinking about. He's got 3 attacks, 3s and 2s minus 2 d3 damage. It's not bad for a wizard. 6 wounds on a 4-up save with a 5-up ward, so he's not super squishy. He is a vampire. I always get confused. I feel like this guy looks like a death mage to me, but he is a vampire, so he has access to the lore of the vampires, and he's a wizard. It doesn't have a sub-faction keyword, so you can put him anywhere. He does have the hunger. Terrible dynamism. At the end of the battle shop phase, if a friendly Exiled Dead unit within 6 of this unit, you can return 1 slain model to that unit. So, like I said earlier, the Exiled Dead here are not summonable. You can't heal them with Deathly Invocation. You can't put them in a grave with Unquiet Dead. You can't bring them back with Endless Legions. So, big downsides on a unit of like zombies. And there's not many of them, even though they do have 2 wounds to sort of make up for that. This lets you bring back 1 of them at the battle shop phase, and it's worth noting that 1 of them has 3 wounds instead of 2. So this kind of heals 3 wounds, since you'll take the wounds on Prentice Markov most of the time, I suspect. So that ability is slightly better than it looks, but your healing guys that have a nil save, so 3 is not really doing much at all. Channel Dynamism, it's a spell that has a casting value of 3, range of 6. If successfully cast, pick 1 Exiled Dead unit, and it can run and charge later in the turn. I don't think you need them to run and charge. I think, like, if you want a unit to do that, you don't spend 220 points on this combination. You spend 130 points on a unit of Direwolves, and it just moves twice as far and piles in 6 inches. So I don't really rate this guy. Like, you have to give up the Vampire Lord command ability to get him. These guys aren't summonable, so they can't even get buffs. He's not really doing a whole lot for you. Let's have a quick look at the Exiled Dead. They get 3 attacks each, 5s and 4s, -1/1 damage, which is not a great profile, hitting on 5s there. And I believe they get a bonus. The unmodified hit roll for an attack made with the Arco electric weapon is 6. They suffer a mortal wound and the attack sequence ends. So even though it hits on 5s, 6s are going to a mortal wound. So it's only 1 in 6 attack that even goes through to the rest of this stuff. So you can basically disregard the bits over there. You do get +1 to casting and unbinding rolls for the wizard while you've got that Prentice Markov. So I guess he's slightly better as a wizard than maybe your Vampire Lords are. You can stack that up to +2 in Legion of Blood, I believe, if you really want an extra +1 to cast. And these guys have a ward of 5 up while they're wholly within 9 of this guy. It's not totally unusable. I just don't think they particularly do anything, and they don't really have any synergies with the other parts of your army. And I think that, if I remember right, sort of fits with his lore. Yeah, he's got a self-imposed exile from Shyish, where his brand of necromancy is taboo. So it kind of makes sense lore-wise with the Ludo narrative alignment, that his stuff doesn't really work with the rest of the Soulblight stuff. It's its own little combined thing, but they're not very useful, and they're not doing anything that you're not getting anywhere else. Like, if you need guys with a 5-up ward, just play Vyrkos, I suppose. If you need a good wizard, I reckon you would take Kato. I guess Kato doesn't get +2 to cast, but yeah, that's about the only thing I can see that's sort of unique in this War Scroll, and it's not really that good. I wouldn't take these guys at all. Morlak, Velmorn, and the Sons of Velmorn. These guys, I think there's only 4 in the Sons of Velmorn, and Morlak together, they cost 220 points. He's got the White King profile, and wheel. He's got the Beheading Strike ability. He's actually a White King with the summonable rule and everything. He gets a free command ability that he can only spend on the Sons of Velmorn. And at the start of the combat phase, you can return a couple of these guys the same way you return Skeleton Warriors. Keeping in mind that there are only 4 of these models, so it's likely if they get attacked, they just get destroyed and you don't get to bring models back. This is slightly improved by the fact that one of them has 4 wounds. So again, if you take the wounds on Sir Jedrad Falseborn first, then the first 4 up you roll here, you want to bring back the 4 wound guy. Which I guess that improves that a little bit. The Sons of Velmorn have 2 wounds each, a 4-up save. They move 6, which is really weird. I don't know why they move 6. Graveguard move 4, and these guys are Graveguard, so that's a weird thing, but worth noting. On average, I'd say they do about this. 2 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1 damage, but some of them do a little bit more, and I think one of them does a bit less. They all do 6s to hit, 6s to wound, do a mortal, just like Graveguard do. And they can improve their save characteristic if they don't pile in. You probably do want to do that, just because with 4 of them, chances are your opponent is trying to get all of them in combat because they just want to get as many models attacking you as possible, and you probably don't get much from piling in. Like, maybe you get 1 or 2 extra attacks. These guys aren't going to do a ton of damage. So you generally probably just want to do the shield up thing. They do have this ability, and I think this is kind of unique in the army. So this might be the reason that you end up taking these guys. Canny Strike at the start of the combat phase. You pick an enemy unit within 1, and roll a dice. On a 2-up, that unit cannot make pile-in moves that phase. It's quite a useful ability. I've seen other people use that against me to great effect. Reducing pile-in is obviously much more effective if your opponent has a good pile-in or needs the pile-in. Soulblight is one of those armies where you have a big block of 30 guys and you really need a pile-in to get an effective use out of the unit. I think it works best for armies that have single models, like a big monster fighting a unit. Stopping them piling in means the monster can sort of tag the very edge of the unit. And if they're fairly strung out, they might only get 2 or 3 attacks back. And you can do the same thing. You can pin a unit. So if you charge it on both ends and stop them piling in, then they get very stuck. But these guys don't move quick enough to really apply that effect where you need it. And they're not durable enough to continuously apply it. So I just don't really think there's a good reason to take these over the generic guys. And again, I think these two things, these are fitting in that place of like, if you have them and you include them in your army because you like the aesthetic or because you like, you just like these models, you've painted them up, you're proud of your paint job, or you're just trying to make 2,000 points. I think these are fine inclusions. They're not horrible, but they don't have the kind of synergy and buffing potential that normally you're looking for to make a competitive list, right? Like, if you compare this to the White King, the one White King can buff your Graveguard, and then when your Graveguard die, he can go on to buffing Skeleton Warriors, and then maybe you get some Graveguard back, and the Skeleton Warriors die, he can go on to buff the returning unit. Like, you can squeeze a lot of value out of a normal White King, whereas this guy, he's really tied to these Sons of Velmorn. I know you can bring both of them back, but this unit doesn't do much damage, doesn't take all that much damage. Doesn't really do that much of anything. So as much as I'm, sort of sad to see bad Warscrolls, I'm happy that I don't have to buy these things that are meant for a totally different game. They're not meant for Age of Sigmar. And yeah, I like that I don't have to be too concerned with them. The same applies for these guys. These guys aren't great. Again, not horrible, but I wouldn't be taking them. What do we look at? I think it's 220 for these guys as well. So, I remember right, they're all 220. Yep, all 3 of these are 220. He's got a normal sort of Vampire Lord profile. He's a wizard. He's got the hunger. He's got the same attacks and everything. He doesn't fly. Again, very weird. Only the normal Vampire Lord flies. All the other ones don't fly. He's got this weird ability here where if him and the Crimson Court are within 3 of an enemy unit at the start of the combat phase, then your opponent has to pick one of the 2 effects. Either they can't attack Duvalle, they can still attack the Crimson Court, can't attack Duvalle, or you can improve the rend characteristic of Duvalle, but not the rest of the Crimson Court. I think that's probably the main thing that stops this being a really powerful unit. If this ability worked for both things, and I think there might be a place for it, but because your opponent gets to pick, they're just kind of gonna pick the one that makes a difference. And even if you just assume your opponent always picks the rend characteristic, like let's say he just never picks this like can't target Duvalle with attacks thing, just assume he has a 2 rend profile, then these guys are definitely not good. They're not worth taking. And that's what your opponent can do. So I think you probably don't take them. It is interesting. This guy has an okay spell, just has a really bad range. So casting value of 5, range of 6. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within range and visible to the caster, add 1 to hit and wound rolls for attacks that target that unit until your next hero phase. If you watch my previous video, you'll notice they remove basically all the bonuses to hit and wound in the book. I think Manfred's one is gone, the Vyrkos one is gone, the Vengorian Lord's one is gone. Just almost book wide. Very, very hard to find +1 to hit and wound, and this guy has it. But unfortunately, with 6 inches range, I don't think it's really applicable. I don't think you're going to be able to deliver that buff to your units almost ever. So for that reason, I don't think you'll use him very much. Again, you'll just take the normal Vampire Lord. for +1 attack on summonable units. I guess if you've got them, you might take them. The Crimson Court, I think, has almost no abilities on it. They have like an okay attack profile. They've got 3 wounds each. The Enforcer guy has 4, so again, you can sort of use that hunger thing a bit like with the Trueblades. You can put an extra wound on Gorath and they can heal it off. They move over terrain like they can fly, which basically doesn't matter, especially with a 6-inch move. That's not doing much for you. And weirdly, even though these guys can move over terrain like they can fly, Prince Duvalle cannot. So you want to keep them right next to each other so you get this ability, but then doing that stops this ability from working. So it's not very well thought out. Yeah, I don't really like these guys as a unit. I do own them. I just run Duvalle as my Vampire Lord model. It's a really valuable box to buy because you're essentially buying yourself 4 Vampire Lords, and it's about the same price as 1 Vampire Lord, I'm pretty sure. You just have to change the bases. I'm pretty sure they come with smaller bases for Underworlds. I'm not sure if that's true for these guys. You might be able to just buy this box and get a cool looking White King and maybe some stand-ins for Graveguard or something. And then I guess this one you're buying like a Necromancer maybe, and then some spare zombies. That can be quite nice. Zombies can increase their unit size above maximum. I don't think that's really going to happen unless you're using like the Vyrkos ability to add models to them, but it's nice to have some spare zombies around. And maybe you want 2 Necromancers in the list now because your Necromancers are only 90 points or something. And he looks to me more like a Necromancer than a Vampire. So I feel like if you're buying these 3 things, you just buy them because they have cool models and you run them as the generic Warscrolls and just feel good about having cool looking alternate versions. Yeah, that's my advice there. Don't take them as actually part of your army. Just buy them for the models. Otherwise, I think out of all the sort of supplementary things, the ones to watch out for are these Askurgan Trueblades. Most people, I think, will want to consider getting a unit of these in their army. Much better when they're reinforced for that reliability. And if you're in, Vyrkos Bloodborne, sorry, good no matter what you're in. I think they're also worth considering. Just, I'm not sure if they're unique, but you probably just want them as a one-off. Vyrkos Bloodborne, they are single, so you can't reinforce them, but you can take multiples. And there's nothing that stops this ability happening multiple times, so it is possible that you want more than one. But considering if you charge with both of them on turn 1, you can only activate one, and they're pretty squishy. I think maybe as a one-of, you might include these. Maybe not. They're pretty hard to buy, so I'd look for them secondhand somewhere. Or pretty expensive to buy because they're in that big block. And then, yeah, these 2 are quite good if you're playing Vyrkos, and if you're playing the zombie list specifically for these guys. But yeah, I think Torgillius will show up. Most Vyrkos players will want to get their hands on one of him. Thankfully, he's like just a Necromancer looking dude, so you could probably, if you really want, you could pick up the Deintalos guy and use him as Torgillius because he's got some similar things going on. Like he has a shooting attack, and yeah, he's a Necromancer looking dude. I think, yeah, that's my advice regarding all the supplemental Warscrolls. Like I said, I'm not super interested in this segment of Warscrolls of the book, so hopefully I didn't skip too much and I sort of did it justice if you're the kind of person who's really interested in this set. But before we go, we do have to talk about something else, which is going to be the match play rules. And the match play rules for Soulblight are very impactful because I think they're very easy for us to achieve. I'm just going to have a bit of a drink before I talk about that. All right, match play. We've got 4 grand strategies now instead of 1. We did keep Lust for Domination, which is controlling more of our grave sites than our opponent. I put this on about the same difficulty level as Take What's Theirs. And it functions pretty similarly as well, since you have to have 2 grave sites in yours and 2 grave sites in theirs. And you end up needing to control 3 of the 4 grave sites. Typically, it means you have to have a bunch of units in their territory You don't have to have the gravesites in their territory exactly, but just not in yours. You have to have a bunch of units up the board, and you have to have some units on your side of the board. That's a pretty similar sort of outlook to completing Take What's Theirs. I do think this can be a lot easier to play if your list isn't very dependent on needing the gravesites. Like if you're not taking many summonable units, which is an unusual Soulblight list, but if you're not, then the gravesites don't do nearly as much for you, and you can sort of put them in just spots that your opponent doesn't want to go, like right in the corners of the board or something, and you can get these points much more easily. Just worth noting that you have to control more gravesites than your opponent. So if you have 2 and they have 2, you don't complete this. But yeah, it's not hard. I feel like it's an okay difficulty level compared to the sort of book ones so far. Empire of Corpses. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if you replaced 3 or more friendly summonable units that were destroyed during the battle. Even without any tricks or anything, just using Endless Legion, this is entirely doable. You just have to have enough summonable units to be doing that, and you have to get sort of at least one of them killed fairly early on, because you want to, like if turn 1 you charge a unit of Black Knights into something on their side, do a bunch of mortal wounds, and then your Black Knights die, or Fellbats or whatever, and you've got access to sort of utilizing that 4-up right from turn 1. I think statistically this is very, very likely. You should get, over the course of the battle, 10 chances to do this. Probably going to miss one, because even if you go first, you're not going to get them destroyed before the end of your first movement phase. But you can sort of use 9 of those chances, and it's very, very hard to have 9 chances at this and to not succeed on 3 of them, especially since it's a 4-up half the time and then a 3-up the other half the time. So I think this is actually very, very easy, especially if part of your plan is to use one of those summonable units like Black Knights to do something very aggressive very early, or you can use like Fellbats to try and achieve desecrate their lands very early, or just like a 10-man unit of skeletons coming out of a gravesite to achieve desecrate. I think as part of just like a getting victory point strategy, you'll be very, very easily able to achieve this while achieving just some other battle tactics as well. We're doing well there. The Dance Macabre. When the battle tactic ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are more friendly summonable units than enemy units wholly within enemy territory. This is pretty difficult because it's just hard to have that many units in enemy territory, and then the restriction that they're summonable. Often some of the units you have left are things like Manfred, or a unit of Blood Knights with like 1 model left or something like that. This is also currently just strictly worse than Take What's Theirs, which is just having more units regardless of what type they are. So, I don't think this is very good. It's definitely, don't take this at the moment, just take the one in the General's Handbook, but when it rotates, I don't know, I'd just be taking Empire of Corpses or Lust for Domination over this any time. So not a good one there. Crimson Larder. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are no heroes from your opponent's starting army on the battlefield, and the only friendly heroes on the battlefield are vampires. Double downside means you basically can't take White Kings or Necromancers, or if you do, you have to find a way to get them killed. It's really dependent on how many heroes and what kind of heroes your opponent has. I really think every time Games Workshop prints a grand strategy, they should just think to themselves, does this, or not just a grand strategy, a command trait or an artifact, or really anything that you have to put in your list that you can't sort of change or pick a different option for at the start of the game, that depends on what is in your opponent's army, they should rewrite that rule. And this depends on what heroes your opponent has and how many. So this rule immediately is bad. Your opponent could have 6 heroes and they're all excellent, and they all have bodyguard effects, and they've got 1,000,000 wounds, and you just have no chance of killing them. For Soulblight in particular, we have basically no shooting, and we've got better magic now, but I still think it's very, very unlikely that you're killing all of your opponent's heroes. Maybe if you roll the 9 up on Spirit Gale literally every turn. But yeah, this is really bad. I wouldn't bother with Crimson Larder or the Dance Macabre. I'd just take Empire of Corpses or maybe Lust for Domination. Really depends on if you're playing an army with a lot of summonable units, you probably play Empire of Corpses. If you're playing an army with very few summonable units, you play Lust for Domination. I think that's pretty straightforward. And compared to the current GHB, where the grand strategies are pretty hard, I think most of the time you're going to play one of these two. I like Vince Venturella. I'm not a fan of having these rules in individual books, but Soulblight have conveniently for us lucked out on getting some fairly easy grand strategies and battle tactics, as we're about to see. All right, so that section, not too bad. Battle tactics. This is a whole different thing. So, Callous Overlord. Pick one friendly summonable unit, more than 3 from all enemy units. Got to remember that's got to be more than 3. You complete this tactic if that friendly unit is destroyed during this turn. That's very easy to do, especially, again, if you're in this army with a fair few summonable units. You can have like 10 skeletons or 20 zombies or something. 3 Felbats. Often you'll have just some damaged summonable unit somewhere partway through the game that is just sort of standing there after you've won a fight, and there's an enemy nearby. Easy, just pop Callous Overlord, charge this thing into the enemy. Be a bit careful about redeploy, because most of the summonable units only move 4, and your opponent can redeploy. They can make sure they're 6 away pretty easily. So you can fail this battle tactic by just being a bit sloppy with placement, or with picking a thing that's slightly too far away and that redeploys a bit further away, because you do have to pick the summonable unit. But obviously with like the White Kings being summonable, this is expanded a little bit. You got more things that can die. You can summon a replacement unit and then pick that. So often you'll have just something that's already quite a small unit because it started with half the models, or it started with wounds or whatever, and you can just pick that to die. Keep in mind it has to be 3 away from enemy units. This is very, very easy. We do currently have it in the book. I think it only got easier. And most games you can find a way to complete this. All right, Curse Unlife. You complete this tactic if any wounds allocated to your general or 2 other friendly vampire units are healed using the Hunger ability this turn. We did have this previously from the Tome Celestial. It was called something else, and it worked very slightly differently. It used to say like Mortark or General or Vampires, but you'll notice if you look at all the Mortark Warscrolls, or including like Valadama and Laukabai and Vorderai, even though they're not Mortarks, those guys are always a general, no matter what subfaction you pick them in. That's the way their new Warmaster ability works. So these guys, if any of them heal any wounds using this ability, then you get the battle tactic or 2 other friendly vampire units. I think the easiest way is usually just to use like your Velocid that you've picked to be your general, or one of those Warmasters to get this battle tactic. It's very, very easy to do. The wording change does make it clearer that you do actually have to heal wounds that have been allocated. The previous one just said you had to heal wounds with the Hunger ability, and it wasn't entirely clear that you had to like take damage and then remove that damage. We thought maybe just triggering the Hunger could get you the battle tactic. Now it's clearer. You do have to have wounds allocated that you then remove, so it's a bit harder. But in that situation, if you find yourself with a Manfred or a Velocid or something that has wounds allocated to it in your turn, it's very, very likely that you will be able to heal, because the old Hunger, you had to kill a model, and sometimes you just need your Velocid or Manfred to go and fight a monster or a hero, and there's a good chance that they won't actually, maybe they just whiff their attacks, they won't kill the monster or hero, so that made this battle tactic pretty risky. Now, the way the Hunger works, you just have to do wounds to your enemy, so this got a lot more reliable and a lot easier to do. Probably not going to come up that much that you have 2 vampires that are damaged that you can heal in the same turn, but very, very frequently you'll have a general that's a Velocid, or like Manfred, Neferata, one of those characters and you'll be able to do this very, very easily. So, bit of an incentive in here as well. You want to have some summonable units. You want to have probably a general that's like a pretty powerful character so that they can use Cursed Unlife as well. But I think this is very easy. The Grasping Dead, pick one summonable unit within 3 of enemy units. You can you complete this battle tactic if this unit is still within 3 of any enemy units at the end of this turn. I think this is the ideal job for some skeleton warriors. They're very likely to not kill the thing they're fighting, because obviously if you kill the thing you're in combat with, then you won't be in 3 of them and you'll fail this. But at the same token, skeleton warriors are very likely to still be alive at the end of the turn when you pick this. It also gets easier if you're using the like 5-up wards in the Vyrkos army as well. Probably, yeah, you can't really use it on turn 1 because you won't be within 3 at the start. But yeah, those 5-up wards or skeleton warriors, I think, make this very easy to complete. So easy, 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 as far as I can tell. The choicest vintage, I think this sounds hilarious. Choicest, I'm sure, just doesn't sound like a word to me. I don't get it, but the choicest vintage. Pick one enemy hero on the battlefield. You complete this tactic if that enemy hero is slain during this turn by an attack made by a friendly vampire hero. Okay, so again, it sort of depends on you having a powerful vampire in your army, like a Blizzard or Manfred or Neferata. But if you do have that kind of unit, this is actually very easy. It doesn't matter, like you don't have to pick a hero that's a monster or a hero that has 10 wounds. You can just pick some 5-wound idiot hero. Your opponent will all-out defense them, but with most of these characters got improved rend, so that gets a lot better. It doesn't say melee attack, so if you take like the Blizzard and shoot him with the breath weapon and you just spike really hard on the shooting attacks, it still gets the kill. I'm a bit sad it doesn't work with magic. You can't use Arcane Bolt or something like that. It just, again, it's sort of anti-thematic that wizards aren't counted as having killed something if they kill it with their magic. They're a wizard. That's how they should kill things. But you know, leaving that aside, this is very easy to do provided you have a vampire hero. It doesn't even have to be your general in this case. A vampire hero that does a decent amount of damage. So in my mind, pretty strong incentives from these command traits to take some big blocks of fairly durable summonable units and a powerful vampire character, whether it's a Blizzard, Manfred, or Neferata. Expand the Grave Empires. You complete this tactic if you control 2 or more objectives wholly outside your territory, and each of those objectives is contested by a friendly, summonable, or vampire unit. I think this summonable or vampire unit thing is really funny. Thinking about the book, basically everything in the book is either summonable or a vampire. I think the only things that aren't might be necromancers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just necromancers. And maybe like the Corpse Cart, which is a different kind of necromancer, or the Mortis Engine, which is, again, a different kind of necromancer. I suppose your allies won't be summonable or a vampire necessarily, so maybe if you're taking some Feck in your army, this might work. I don't think you really have a good reason to take any Feck. So really, this objective thing, battle tactic, looks to me like control 2 or more objectives wholly outside your territory, which is a very easy battle tactic. Some missions, it's literally impossible because you just won't have objectives outside your territory. I think it's something they should consider when they look at battle tactics. A lot of the time, they'll have something that like either isn't objective based or only has ones in your territory or only has one outside. But in missions where they have enough objectives for you to satisfy this requirement, I think this is a very, very easy battle tactic to complete. So far, all of them quite easy. Maybe depending on the list you've taken, but if you just think about that in your list building, very, very easy. All right, last one. Endless Nightmare. Pick one friendly Soulblight Gravelords summonable unit on the battlefield. You complete this tactic if 6 or more slain models are returned to that unit during this turn. Okay, so I think there's a couple ways to do this. Firstly, you can get 4 models back with Deathly Invocation because it heals 3 and then an extra 1 if you're near a gravesite. So you need to get another 2 somehow. I don't think the Vyrkos heroic action actually returns slain models. I think it just adds new ones. So I don't think you can do that. I think Nagash adds models back, so if you have Nagash, this is very easy to do. And the Mortis engine, maybe? I've seen a lot of people talking about using a Mortis engine to get this battle tactic. You don't need to. You already have 5 other easy battle tactics. Don't take a Mortis engine. It's not worth it. But the easiest way to do this is to just take Skeleton Warriors, right? Skeleton Warriors return back on a 4-up at the start of the combat phase. So if it's your turn and you have a unit of skeletons that has lost, let's say it's lost 10 models, you can return 4 to it with Deathly Invocation. And then you've got 6 that are dead. You roll 6 dice, and you only need 2 of them to be a 4-up to complete this battle tactic. It is dice-based, but the more damage that skeleton unit is, the more likely it is that it'll succeed. And once you're past about 10 models, it becomes statistically very, very improbable that you don't complete this battle hack. And worth noting that if they get returned and then die, they still count as having been returned. So what works against us in the battle shock phase works for us here. You can have like even a unit of 10 skeletons that's got only 4 that you've lost. You can heal 4 with Deathly Invocation, and then you can try and damage them before the combat phase if your opponent unleashes hell against them, or if you somehow cause the bodyguard effect to trigger, or if you use like Damned, you can cause extra wounds to them to try and increase your chance of this happening. I think that won't come up much, but this is, in my mind, if you've got a 30 block of Skeleton Warriors or even a 20, very, very plausible that you just find yourself in a situation at the start of the turn with a heavily damaged skeleton unit. Remember, they don't have to activate anymore. They can just be damaged and stand there, do nothing. And at the start of the combat phase, you just get a ton of skeletons back. So this is, in my mind, very, very easy to complete. It won't come up all the time, but still very, very easy when it does. It synergizes really well with the Grasping Dead because having a 30 block of skeletons means that you're in a good situation to complete the Grasping Dead. Skeletons might be able to do damage if you buff them up, like with a Vampire Lord and a White King. But in the turn you do Grasping Dead, maybe you just don't. Maybe you go buff something else, buff your Graveguard, and they can go fight something. So I think these two work really well together. You want a bunch of summonable units, so you can do like Empire of Corpses and Callous Overlord as well. And then if you've just got a powerful Vampire Lord, Manfred Neferata, Vlozard, or I guess Vordry, I keep forgetting Vordry. Any of those guys, even Laukavai, I think. These two are very easy as well. So Soulblight barely even have to look outside their book to do their battle tactics, which might be a frustrating experience for your opponent. Every turn you're just going to be like, oh, I'm going to play one of my own battle tactics again. They didn't give us the grand strategy most people are getting, where you just have to complete 5 battle tactics and have them all be from the book. I think that's because these are definitely very easy battle tactics. And like I said, I'm not really happy about having book battle tactics. But given they exist, these are a very, very powerful, very useful set for us to have. So well worth memorizing, and also not too difficult to memorize. Like there's 3 that revolve around summonable units, 1 that's just controlling objectives, and 2 that revolve around sort of fighting with your big vampire hero. Mostly things that your army is going to be doing anyway. And this one, again, I think you just take this if you don't have many summonable things, and you take this maybe if you have a lot of summonable things, or if in particular you plan on getting one of those summonable things killed during turn 1. Because then you've got a very good chance of replacing 3 or more. I should mention also this is much better if you have Nagash or Gorslav, because if you have Gorslav, you can almost guarantee that you're going to be able to achieve this, because there are other ways in the book to bring back friendly summonable units, not just Endless Legions. You don't have to use Endless Legions to complete this grand strategy. So overall, I think we've done very well out of match play. For the other things, watch out for those Askurgan Trueblades. If you're in Vyrkos, probably pick up Torgillius. If you're playing a ton of zombies, you probably already know this, but you'll want Gorslav. Maybe check out the Vyrkos Bloodborne. I think those guys are pretty neat. And other than that, I think you can leave most of those Warscrolls alone. Just be aware that there are options there for proxies, or for if you're including 2 necromancers, it's nice to have 2 different looking necromancers. Or White Kings, same sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully this has been beneficial for you. I might do a summary video, because my previous 2 videos were both 4 hours long on the sort of core Warscrolls, and then on the subfaction abilities before that. And yeah, I want to do a shorter thing that's like, here's a summary of the important changes, here's what we gained and what we lost. And yeah, I think we gained a lot more. Is worth considering when you look at like win rate statistics in the future. I think the win rate is going to be bolstered a fair bit by what's going on here. We get a lot of free victory points in Soulblight, and sometimes it can feel really bad playing an army where you actually sort of lose on the table. You lose by you're not trading well, you're not holding objectives or any of that sort of thing, but you just sort of get free points because your book says you do. I don't have that fun of an experience when I play that sort of game. So the win rate might look better than it really should, but until they stop using book grand strategies and battle tactics, then you may as well use them. You may as well win off the back of them and do well at tournaments that let you use them. Yeah, I think we've done well. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I've got nothing else to say, apparently. So, yeah, thanks for watching these videos. And again, I'm not sure if I'm going to make a whole bunch more, or whether it's just the Soulblight review because I play the army and then I'll be done with it. I'm painting up some Slaves to Darkness, and I do have a lot of thoughts on the Slaves to Darkness book. So if you are interested, if you do find this to be interesting content, probably let me know, so then I know, or I'm encouraged, I guess, to make more videos in the future. Because I'm sort of on the fence about whether I'll do that or not. All right. Thanks a lot.